Good afternoon and welcome to our Friday COVID Convo, and appreciate those that chose to join us today, as well as reminding all that we are recording these, and we have found many folks coming back and watching these or sharing them with others within their organization. So welcome to our call today. I'm Jeff Schultz with ICS. I'm one of the managing partners. We're going to jump quickly into our agenda. And again, I want to thank our presenters and panelists today for sharing their time, their expertise, and sort of their reality TV show that we're going through together. So thank you all. We're going to start with a quick poll from folks. One of the things that we'd like to hear from you is, as we're talking on these Fridays, what are some of the topics that you'd like us to focus on? So we'll put that poll in front of all attendees. Please tell us and share with us what ideas and what thoughts you'd like us to focus on more. Kim Lutz with Bemidji is going to talk about some of the work they're doing in partnership with Sanford Health. We're going to get an update from the 3 different districts on how things are going. We're going to focus a little more agenda today on some of the other than just curriculum type of things, activities, sports, facilities, and those types of things. We'll open it up again for everyone that might be new to the call. Feel free to use the chat function to post questions that you have along the way. And we really encourage you to put those questions together. If we can't address them on the call today, we always go through and put them in our frequently asked questions on the website. So we try our best to answer any and all calls or questions that people bring. We've got Steve Salee to share with us today progress the service co-ops have in partnership with MDH on the role they're playing. And I appreciate Steve taking time to be part of this. We'll have updates from both Todd Rapp on communications and Neil Carlson from the University of Minnesota on industrial hygiene and some of the different things that the latest in scientific studies. So without further ado, Aaron, you want to try to kick off our poll for the group? You can see we have 9 topics, and we're looking for you to click on those topics that you'd like us to focus on more, whether it's masks, face coverings, PPE, transportation, facilities, communications, funding, some of the educational learning models, maybe more in the hybrid and those types of things, the extracurricular and sports, meals, as well as outbreaks, contract tracing, and those types of things. Please pick on those that you think you'd like more input on. We'll close this here shortly, and we'll get a chance to see what topics people would like to see. Just a few more seconds then on the poll, the multiple choice. All right, as we're waiting for the results of that to pop up and Aaron to share those with us, I'd like to introduce Dr. Fred Nolan, who's going to just kick things off for us. And Fred, maybe start by sharing the results of our poll.
Well, I can see we've got people coming in. Learning models is looking pretty good. Communication, PPE, and mask coverings. Those are all topics. Specifically, I think Steve Salee will be able to talk a little bit later about the distribution of state funded PPE for districts. And we will be looking at masking. If you go to our ICS site, Reopening Schools, you'll see click on my blog. I blogged on students wearing masks and the medical exemption conundrum, which is a real conundrum to deal with. And we'll be talking more about that in a couple of weeks, right before school. Clearly, education learning models is leading the way with 43%. And actually next week, we thought we would be focusing on academic and staff preparation, which would be how to actually do the models. But maybe the three of you that are presenting today could respond to talk a little bit about your education model in addition to what we're planning on talking about today, which is the non-academic stuff. It's how you're dealing with activities, lunch, transportation, all of those things that you have to do in addition to getting ready to actually have teaching and learning going on. But before we do that, we're going to have Bemidji talk about their unique relationship with Sanford Health and how they are determining what their education model is going to be. So next slide, Aaron, and we'll turn it over to Tim Lutz, Superintendent of Bemidji.
Fred, can I jump in? Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, one thing too is it didn't show clearly on the graph because it got cut off at the bottom, but outbreaks and contract tracing was actually the #1 vote getter. So again, speaks to Lee can talk through that a little bit about the work that the service co-op's doing to help.
Right, and also Neil Carlson. We may want to have a whole session on that with Neil at some point in the future, more prominently positioned. So thank you, Jeff. I missed that down at the bottom. Tim.
Thank you for the introduction, Fred. Tim Lutz, Bemidji Area Schools Superintendent. And I've been talking about this the last couple of sessions we've had, but I've really appreciated the partnership we have not only with our Beltrami County Public Health individuals and professionals, but with Sanford Public Health. And they have been invaluable, both of those organizations, at helping us plan for and understand and interpret the data and the situation at hand. And one of the benefits that we've had with our local health experts is that they're helping us gain confidence in ourselves, and then they're helping us engender a sense of confidence amongst our community. At our most recent board meeting, we did adopt our 2 base plans where we are following the model with the numbers in our county for the elementary to be in school, secondary to be a hybrid model on a weekly interchangeable basis. And we had the chief executive, the vice president of Sanford, who's also a doctor and is their chief medical officer, present to the board. And that was it was very well watched. We had over between 400 and 500 individuals in our community watch our YouTube channel and watch the board meeting and listen to Dr. Wilcox explain that Bemidji area schools should be able to open safely, that he and his team have all great confidence in the school district. We've shown over the course of the summer that we can open safely and operate safely with protocols in place. Our summer school was successful, so we have every confidence, he said, in the school for the start of the school year. So that was really nice, and it was an amazing experience to know that we were the must-watch TV that night. Maybe a little nervous, but it went well. The board struggled and took a good 2 hours to make a final decision, but they did finally come around to our recommendations on how to start. One of the things I really appreciate with County Health is that they're providing us with up-to-date daily rolling counts. And you'll see that slide in just a little bit, but I guess we can go there now because I've already mentioned how we're opening with the kids in school. This is what we get from Beltrami County every day. This is not the official guidance, of course, that we can run with in terms of the 2-week rolling count from the MBH. But this gives us at least a week or 10 days head start on understanding what we're going to see a week or 2 later from the Department of Health's numbers. And every day our numbers have been going down almost a full point. 3-4 days ago it was 14 something, then it was 13, then 2 days ago it was 12, and this is from yesterday. So I'm hoping we can continue to see these numbers drop, and it's just very helpful to have that. On the next slide, you can see some of our non-academic preparations that we're doing. We have decided to move forward with limited sports competitions, just very limited. And what we're doing is working with parents to help provide ride sharing. We've reached out to our district attorney, Kevin Rupp, and he has developed for us a policy that the board approved and at the board meeting last Monday night, and then a waiver form that parents can sign. And the important thing about this is that we have to stay away from these preparations. If parents want to work out these details and these arrangements for carpooling each other's children who are in sports, they are welcome to do that as long as we have the paperwork and we are not, as a district, coordinating it. Because once we step in and start coordinating this, we become culpable and liable. But if parents can do this themselves, then they can carpool to and from games and help us out so we can keep our buses to about 50% capacity to games. So that's what we're doing with sports. Meals, I touched on this a little bit last week, and you'll hear more a little bit in a video clip coming up. But we're working on a combination of some grab and go classroom meals and classrooms sometimes going outside to eat, and then limited use of lunchrooms with much more expanded space being used in these lunchrooms. We've been working with ICS for our hybrid plan. I have a sample here of our high school floor plan, and we have the same floor plans for our other schools that need to go into the hybrid model or may go into the hybrid model. And you can see here, the blue areas are our classrooms, and those dots represent desks that are separated by at least 6 feet, student desks. The yellow areas are additional classrooms, area spaces that have been identified for classroom space to be used for when we need to expand outward because we're limiting our regular classroom space to 50% capacity. So that's been a really good service that we have been receiving from ICS. On the next slide, you can see I would like to share with you the important piece in my mind now is moving forward with communications. We've come up with our base plans. Now it's important to really figure out and identify what these plans are going to look like and to communicate that with all of the parents, the students, and staff members in our buildings. And I asked some of our schools who have more tech savvy and technology access to come up with some kind of a visual, a video that they can share with their families. And this is just about 75 seconds of a video that our 4th and 5th grade elementary school called Gene Dillon Elementary has put together. And you can see how clearly this shows what we are doing. While we're queuing it up, my hope is that this will give a lot of parents, lower their anxiety levels and help them understand what school will look like.
Traveling in the school will also look a little different. Here's an example of our student line socially distanced. As we make our way down the hall, we stay to the right, keep our hands on our sides, and we still try to maintain that 6-foot barrier between each student. This year, we're also going to be limiting the number of students in the bathroom at one time. Now it's Dilly's turn. Washing your hands is a 4-step process. First, the paper towel. Second, getting soap. Third, washing your hands and scrubbing them very well between your fingers and all surfaces. Fourth, grabbing that paper towel, drying your hands, and throwing it away. This reduces
That's our principle
on common surfaces. Drinking fountains won't be used. Instead, water bottles or cups from the water fill station. Recess and outside opportunities will be a chance for students to remove their masks if they so choose. It will also provide an opportunity for students to be outside with their peers. Assigned playground spaces will rotate on a weekly basis.
So as you can see, parents have questions about what things are going to look like. Our teachers have questions about what a day will look like, and being able to show people, not just put it on print or on paper or explain in words over the phone, in my opinion, will really help people understand what's happening. It'll answer questions, and once questions are answered and people can see what we're doing to keep their children safe, their anxiety levels will hopefully go down a little bit. On the right side of that screen there, I've asked our principals a more low-tech approach, but that is to make sure that they post their plans and that they have FAQs and Q&A documents on every site. And this is more about consistency. If I'm a parent and I have 3 children in the district, one's an elementary student, one's a middle school student, one's high school, I'm going to want to be looking at each school website, learning what each school is doing. And if I have something that looks totally different on each site, that's going to be a bit confusing. I want to make it simple for parents to have the same kind of a format, to read the plans, to go to a place with questions and answers, FAQs, and learn about what each site is doing for each of my children. So we're ramping up our communications there. I'll be working on some videos over the next couple of weeks too, where I'm just going to be sitting down and taking about 5 or 6 minutes to talk to parents and staff members and students and try to be a calm presence in the district and let them know that we're making our first and foremost priority that of health and safety in our district. That pretty much sums up what we're doing in the Bemidji area schools. Thank you.
All right, for Mora Public Schools, thank you, Tim, for that information. Some good takeaways. Non-academically, we're all thinking about some of those other areas that don't necessarily pertain to the school. Kind of just to give you some background on where Mora Public Schools are at right now. Our numbers started out really low, like 3 per 10,000, then it jumped up a little bit to 5. And now we're at 9.8. So we are right on that bubble there. However, we have weekly meetings with Kanabec County Public Health, and they break down all the numbers for us, similar to what you saw for Bemidji. And they can trace and track how many of the cases are actually related to either parents or students within the school. And so most of our numbers are from an area nursing home. And so they are still giving us the recommendation of in-person learning. So that's been really helpful. So we're kind of on that edge, but yet at the same point, it's good to know and great to work with our local health, county public health. For activities, we usually have one big sports meeting in the fall with our parents and athletes and coaches. And this year we had to do things quite different. We had small little gatherings where parents and athletes, it could only be one parent. And so we broke up into bigger areas within the school so we could social distance and mask. And the nice thing is all of our parents and athletes came with masks. So the word is out. We also have a good relationship with Wellia Health to collaborate and talk to our student athletes about remaining vigilant, staying healthy, checking for those conditions, and if they are sick or unhealthy, that they stay home and they report that to their coach and to the school. In regard to food service, we're creating some more space, obviously trying to make sure that the lunch tables that we have aren't real conducive to distancing. And so we're trying to create more spaces for students to eat, staggering more lunch shifts, using some of our gym spaces to eat lunch, encouraging students to eat outside. Mora's kind of unique. We have an open lunch for our juniors and seniors if they qualify. So they have to meet some criteria. And so at first we thought we would not do that. And now we've decided we should do that because that'll help us with the spacing issue. As far as physical movement, we've really tried at the elementary. I think that's a lot easier. We have, you've seen elementary students, they don't transition as often, and when they do, their teachers are right with them. So the supervision is quite different. At the high school, we're staggering times as much as we possibly can. And I think we might even be having groups of students at the junior high level stick with their cohort groups in math. So that's an opportunity for us to keep the same kids together. We did buy some partitions or plexiglass partitions for our elementary students, especially in Title I reading, where they're doing a lot of reading. And then our enhanced cleaning, like every other school, we're trying to hit the high touch areas. We have some sprayers that we're going to be spraying within the classrooms at the end between days. So those are some of the things that we're doing to keep everyone safe. As far as transportation goes, we are doing double runs, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One is to keep our students distance as much as possible. Our bus drivers were really nervous about packing the buses, so that helps with a limited number of students on the bus. So we'll have a high school and an elementary run, and we will also we're going to split students up ahead of time. So we have an A group and a B group if we do end up going a hybrid model. So students and families will know where they are and what they need to do before school starts. So that's something that our transportation is working through. As far as back to school planning, I think Fred might have mentioned this before, that's another topic that we're just getting into with our admin team. And I think we had a 3-hour meeting the other day, and they want to meet again on Monday just to kind of walk through some of those situations and scenarios, and trying to communicate all of our plans to our staff and to our parents. One of the things that has been really successful at Mora that I've heard from our staff is we've had some we call them town hall meetings, and we've had a couple of them already, and we're going to have another one next week. It's just an opportunity for us to communicate with our staff members so they can actually hear and see kind of what some of the plans are going to be. And this next one, the first one we did, we focused on our hybrid model. And the second one, we focused more on, that was after the July 30th announcement on the Safe Learning Plan. So we walked them through that, what that meant, the different scenarios. And now the next one, I think what we'll do is we'll probably dig in a little deeper to each area. So like our district nurse would have 5 minutes. There's a little bit of feedback there. So just breaking it down a little bit more. One other unique thing I think schools might want to consider, and this came from Kanabec County Health, is they gave us a scenario, like what if a staff member would get a COVID case, or what if a student would get a COVID case. And then we're going to walk and talk through that scenario with our admin, and then we can kind of share that with parents and share it with our staff. The other thing Kanabec Public Health did is they wrote a letter that we're going to communicate with. One of my letters probably is, you know, how do we come up with making a decision about what model we're using? And Kathy Bursky from Kanabec Public Health wrote a letter and just talked about, yeah, we pay attention to the numbers, but there's also a lot of different factors that go into making a decision. So if anybody wants that letter, you can let me know, and I'll try to share that. Obviously, you'd want to work through your public health and get their permission to do something like that as well. And so that's kind of what we're doing. I know there were a couple other questions, I guess, as far as funding and things like that. We're just walking through all the funding pieces, and just like everyone else, it sounds like we're going to get some more information on the CRF funds, and just trying to allocate those as best we can and try to prioritize all of our costs. I think that's it for more. I don't know if we had any other slides. I think that's it.
Okay, I'll dive right into the East Central update. Good afternoon, everyone. Our newest case rate data in Pine County is 2.06. You can see our history listed there like the other schools. We remain relatively low. So our recommendation and what our board is moving forward with is an in-person learning scenario. So far, for the most part, everyone seems pretty comfortable with that idea around the county. We're a county with only about 30,000 people. So when you see numbers this low and you think about how geographically large our county is, that helps put some minds at ease for the most part. I've had this in our previous Friday COVID Convo, but this is what public health we review every time we meet with them. We meet Thursdays every week to talk through what are the numbers doing and what do they look like. But the superintendents wanted to know exactly how many cases does this get down to. And so every week this chart goes up and we talk about the number of cases and where we are and what it means for our learning scenario. So as we talk to them, one of the things we always gauge with our public health partnership is their level of comfort. And I actually tease them and I say, when you get nervous, then I'll get nervous. And when they talk to us so far, they are cautiously optimistic. Again, very cautious. That's their job in public health, to be cautious, but they're standing ready to support and help us message this because they do support that option. This partnership has been really key. And so for the participants on the call, if you are not actively talking with public health, I strongly encourage you to do that. And I know that depending on your county size and county budgets and all that, staff, the amount of staff in public health can change, but there should be a strong partnership there. And in Pine County, we talk closely about making sure all of the schools in the county try to get on a similar page, because we know that families look to those other schools for, here's what's happening in Hinckley-Finlayson or Pine City or whoever else you have in your county. And so I think it's important that this partnership exists between the school districts and with public health. Each week we review that case rate data and talk about new cases. So for example, yesterday they told us that there was 4 new cases in our county as of yesterday. So when we look at next week's data, we are expecting our data to tick up just a little bit. And so when we gauge their comfort level, it's nice to have that heads up so we can prepare our messaging as well. We've asked them to help us with resources to parents, and I think the other schools talked about that too. They are preparing documentation where if a kid gets sick at school, regardless of what the illness is, information we can hand to them as they pick their kids up from the health office. Especially as it relates to when should you get a COVID test and how long should you stay home. And they're going to do that for us. And I think it's great to have them put that together because it ends up being standard across the county. And that's a really helpful thing, we feel. We have moved into, with public health, our informal tabletop exercises. So there was some feedback there about contact tracing and how do we handle this. Put that back on public health to help us walk through that. So we are putting scenarios up in front of our team and saying, what happens if Johnny in Mrs. Smith's class gets COVID? Let's walk through that. What does that mean? What could that look like? And of course, we have to make a lot of assumptions and things like that, but it helps us wrap our head around what will we do and what is our response. And really the bottom line, we're feeling, there's a lot of details to that, but really the bottom line is most every illness will be treated like COVID for a while. And we're going to have to do that as school systems. It's quite likely that any kid with the temperature will be home for a minimum of 10 days. And so we have to prepare for that and work with public health to message that out. They are helping us with our school health office considerations. What does this look like when you staff it with a health aide and a part-time nurse? What are the recommendations for those people? Where should the kids wait? Where's the isolation room? What do we do if it takes 2 hours for the parent to get there? Those are the kind of things public health is helping our health office step through. Develop common messages for the county schools. We want that Pine County letterhead and that Pine County logo in those messages too, so they can see that it isn't just East Central Schools telling them this. It's a partnership with a lot of people. And of course, brainstorming, networking, venting sometimes. Having them be able to say it's okay to not have all the answers. We don't either. That's a big thing and a big partnership. So just a shout out to Pine County Health for what they're doing to help. As far as our school district goes, the topics the other schools have covered as well. Activities. We're a small school, so if we look at what do we have, what are we allowed to have this fall, we're down to just cross country. And so those practices have begun. I'm encouraged because some of our football and volleyball players are running cross country, so our numbers have increased there. Practice has begun, and so far that's going quite well. We're fortunate to have a state park across the street from us, so it's fun to watch the kids go run in the state park. But who would have guessed that you could socially distance when running? I find it comical to watch them when they go because they follow the rules. And really, when it comes to cross country, right, you're trying to catch the next person in front of you, but it's funny to watch them keep that distance as they run. Our athletes are not using the locker rooms. They're asked to come ready to run and to go home that way. Our activities director and coaches are preparing for that fall practice window that's coming up for our other sports. So, more to come on that. Moving right into food service, we're planning to have our kids eat in our cafeteria. We have rather large cafeterias for the size of our school. And so we believe that we can distance kids really quite well. We've added more tables to the spaces, and we've labeled seats. So there's dots on each seat for where they can and cannot sit. And so our cafeteria supervisors will work hard to make sure they follow that and space the kids out as much as possible. It also means too that we will have a lot of outdoor dining taking place. So our communities have donated picnic tables. We have a chemical health coalition that's buying lawn chairs to put out kind of some of our parking spaces out back so the kids can slide outside and eat on those nice days. We're asking, well, not asking, we're going to require students to sit by class. So whatever class dismisses you for lunch in the high school is the class you will sit with, because those are the kids you've been around, you've been in class with. So we're going to try to cluster the kids kind of by their class that they're in. And of course, in the elementary, that's a little bit simpler to do as well. We're currently working on our tray drop-off and a la carte procedures, because of course, that's an easy place for kids to gather, and of course, to spread COVID. So working through that procedure, probably headed towards some type of cart option in different locations in the cafeteria so that we do not have those mass gathering places. Some of our physical space changes that we're working through. Superintendents have to get creative with school funding, and these new funding streams offer some opportunities. So the lens that I'm taking with this is, are there purchases we can make to support the changes that have to happen because of COVID, but also solve some problems for us post-COVID? For example, we have a plan for how we're going to purchase furniture in our elementary school. We buy 2 classrooms worth of desks each year. But perhaps with COVID, we should look at purchasing maybe 4 this year so that we can space out the kids much faster. We call them nested desks. There's probably a different name for them, but those desks that someday they can come back and do that group work with. But for COVID, they're on wheels. We can space the kids. We can put X's on the floor and help these kids separate. But again, trying to get creative with that funding, so it isn't just those one-time things that only work during a pandemic. Just before this meeting, we ordered some table dividers, those clear plexiglass dividers that we've probably had 1,000 emails about sitting in our inbox, but we are going to order some of those and try to space the kids that are sitting at tables, putting the kids on the end of the tables and putting those dividers in between, just to support some of that splash guard idea, right? Keeping the kids safe. Our custodial department has purchased some electrostatic sanitizing guns. This is one of those things that we still are unsure whether that's going to make a big difference, but we also think that there is some advantage to people seeing that sanitizing happening in their classrooms, and so we have made those purchases. Our procedures in our classrooms, every classroom space and every office space, really every room, is going to get 3 cotton cloth towels each day and a bottle of sanitizer in every space. These towels will be replaced daily, and we're working on that drop area where those would go. Like in an elementary classroom, for example, those cloths would be left in the sink in the classroom so that our custodians can come in there, grab them, set new cloths out for the next day, and those teachers are ready to support the cleanliness and sanitation in their classrooms. We're working through a mask drop area. We're going to have cloth masks for the kids, right? Some kids are going to, we're going to get 1 mask per kid through our service co-op, but we think that we're going to have more than 1. And if they have to drop them off to be washed and laundered, where will that be? And that's going to make people uncomfortable to have masks that have been used laying in classrooms. So centrally located mask drop areas that people can move to those laundry facilities and get those cleaned. We are starting to remove our non-essential furniture to allow for more space. This is one of the hardest things for elementary teachers, is to look at those classroom spaces and say, hey, we can't have those beanbags this year, or other things like that. What does that mean for us? Those kidney-shaped tables that get to be challenging with distance. What does that mean for those elementary teachers? How will they do those phonics lessons? Those things are, kids have to be by them when we're working through that right now. One of our bigger purchases we're looking at is thermal imaging cameras. This is an idea that came actually from our neighbor Pine City Schools. And I think they got it from another school district, but cameras that actually will thermal image kids as they come into the building. So it'll actually take their temperature in bigger masses and actually send a notification to principals and to the health office for us to go investigate further. So that'd be part of our screening procedures each day. We're not quite there on purchasing just yet. We have some details to sort through yet. It's going to be tough to have it put in the first day of school, but as soon as possible if we decide to make that purchase. Transportation in an in-person model is going to be challenging, right? Students will be required to have a mask when they get on the bus. And you know, that begs the question, how do students get their masks prior to the first day of school? Just about a week ago, we decided that we were not going to have our normal traditional open house that we normally have during workshop week. We've actually shifted to what we're calling a beep and greet. That will be a drive-up open house where our staff members will be outside on the sidewalk, on the lawns with signs on their teacher names, and the kids can pull up, roll the window down. We can give them their PPE. We can give them any other information that those particular teachers need to give them. And they can give us a little horn beep on the way out of the parking lot, and they'll be hopefully ready to go the first day of school. So moving to a beep and greet model, which is an interesting concept, and my principals get credit for working on those things. But back to transportation, you know, our kids are going to sit in family groups. We're going to load the buses from back to front. Try to have as much space as possible, but it's going to be extremely challenging. Our bus company tells us that they'll open the windows as much as possible, open them in the front and open them in the back to allow for airflow. They believe we can probably even do this even in the winter, have the heat up higher, but circulate some air through the buses. And then when the buses get to school each morning, staggering those unloading times so we don't have mass amounts of kids coming into the building all at once. Thank you.
Okay, I will jump in here. My name is Steve Salee. I'm the Executive Director at the Southeast Service Co-op in Rochester. So I'm representing the 9 service co-ops in the state of Minnesota today. So as you know, we are going to be distributing the PPE equipment that you've all been waiting for. We just got the update last night that those are going to be delivered Tuesday and Wednesday next week for most locations. So if you have not heard from your service co-op yet, you will be in the very near future. Some of the metro locations will receive those on Monday next week, but for the most part, the 9 service co-ops will be Tuesday, Wednesday, where they will be delivered to the co-ops. We will be making arrangements, and every region is going to be a little bit different, but you will be getting information as to when and where you can pick those cases up. So the big question we are getting is, how big of a vehicle am I going to need to pick those things up? And for my region, Rochester is our biggest school district in our region, and they are going to receive about 2.5 pallets. There's about 50 cases of equipment on each pallet. So they'll need a decent sized truck for Rochester, but I think for the most part, you will also get a breakdown as to how many cases you're going to be receiving. For the most part, most of my districts in my region will be able to pick something up in either like a van or a minivan. I don't think it's going to take up a tremendous amount of room, but a lot of that will obviously depend on the size of your district. So the bigger the district, obviously, the bigger the vehicle you're going to need. But those breakdowns will be coming to you. I'm sure, you know, like my region, I sent some information out this morning in Southeast, and you know, for Southeast, our pickup date's going to be Wednesday next week. We're going to try to do everything in one day. That information, again, will be coming to you from your director or whoever is responsible for the co-op in your region. As you also are probably aware, the service co-ops are going to be assisting with the communications within the state. So each service co-op is going to identify a regional coordinator. We've been holding or been part of a host of meetings with the Department of Health and the Department of Education, trying to figure out exactly what that flow is going to look like, that communication channel, and how this is going to work. There will be meetings scheduled within your region either on Monday or Tuesday next week. So if you haven't gotten the invite to those, you will be getting those shortly as well. And that's going to be very specific from the Department of Ed, the Department of Health, as to what those, what that channel is going to look like within your region. So again, you'll be getting more information on Monday and Tuesday next week with a much greater breakdown, and then contact information as to exactly how this thing's going to work. The service co-ops are going to be really the communication center for the district. So we'll be assisting school districts with, you know, any data collection. And the whole purpose of that is to try to eliminate all of the communication going to the Department of Health, the Department of Education. They obviously aren't going to be able to support a flood of phone calls and emails and things like that throughout the school year. So the co-op is hoping to take some of those things off of their plate. So you will learn much more about that on Monday and Tuesday with this specific time. And I believe a lot of you have already received those invites. If not, you'll be getting those very soon. And then as far as the service co-ops, the person representing the co-ops on the communication piece will be Cliff Carmody at Southwest West Central. So he's going to be the main point of contact, but you will have a team in place for your region. And again, those will take place next week. So that's all I have from the service co-op, unless there's any questions for me. You feel free to type those in the chat.
Next, we've got Neil Carlson from the University of Minnesota, just to give us an update on some of the health things that we've been learning about over the last week or so. Neil?
Thanks a lot. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, there's an interesting thing. Fred asked me to take a look at some of the guidance from the Minnesota Department of Education. Should be, I think, MDH or MDE or whatever, I'm not sure which. But the University of Colorado has some extremely interesting information with respect to ventilation and choir areas and all sorts of aspects of engineering. And I think the engineers in the group would be very interested in it. They have a special section for choir rooms in this spot, and that kind of talks about that. And the interesting piece, and I'll show it on the next slide, which would be on how many air changes per hour. But just from our standpoint, all of our performing arts pieces at the university are going to be going distant learning with some minor spots for individualized training, but they're really trying to just minimize it, and you'll see why in the next slide. So this is the estimate of particle generation, and this is a relatively crude estimate of it. But if you're a person who's lecturing and just breathing, the amount of particle or viral particles you're putting out is pretty low. If you're just speaking like I'm speaking now, we get a small amount. But if you're lecturing, really projecting the voice or singing or acting, there's a large amount of particles that are generated, and that's why it's important to be wearing a face covering to minimize the particle generation. But it's also problematic if you're playing an instrument or if you're singing aloud, and that explains why you have there's potential issues for transmission during those activities. So that's why it would be prudent not to do that inside, or if you're going to do it outside, or if you're going to engineer it out, definitely do it virtually. Next slide. So we've run across an issue from Duke University did a study on cloth masks. And they found that some of the gator masks that they were testing, they were just trying to see how well the mask protected other individuals. And some of the gator masks that they were using converted some of the large droplets into smaller droplets. So they in fact made it worse for viral transfer to other individuals. So they made the particles smaller so they'd stay in the air longer. And we did some testing on some of the gators that the University of Minnesota had. And so I did a simple test like this. And you take a tissue paper, put it in front. If the tissue paper moves, the mask you're wearing is not doing a very good job of protecting the other individuals. So we're in the process of pulling those types of gaiters off of that. And we also found one of the cloth masks that we had also failed that test. So it's a fairly simple test that people can do to find out if what they're wearing is protecting other individuals from, at least providing some amount of protection to other individuals. The other way of doing it is a flame test, but we didn't want anybody to burn down their house. So that's why we're going with the tissue test. And we're also doing a research project. We just got funding for it today, where we'll be doing some testing, and it's with a powered air purifying device attached onto some either a respirator or onto a full face shield. And we're going to attempt to do that for some educators and students, and we're looking for a couple of districts to do that work with starting sometime in September. But we're going to purchase about 250 of these, and we'd like to have people in the districts try it out, see what they think, give us their feedback.
Todd Rapp from Rapp Strategies, just to chat quick about communications and communication advice and update for folks.
Sure, Jeff. Yeah, a couple of things I wanted to add here, and I am keeping an eye on Department of Education and the Department of Health guidance that it continues to be amended. And if necessary, we will update that checklist that we provided to participants, and we'll send out a new version of it as necessary, particularly as different communication requirements change. I want to highlight the comments that you heard about working with health systems and public health. It's really important as you have your community members trying to find out more information, try to understand the decisions you've made, and maybe even as there's pushback, for you to have really good third-party support. And that's why working closely with public health and health systems in your area is just so valuable. The more informed they are about what you're doing, and the more they agree with the strategies that you're following, the more they'll be able to help you in talking with other community members and providing you with that support. I'd also like to point out that there's likely to be an increased amount of national information that your parents and others are going to be obtaining. It's because this has become a political issue in the national presidential campaign, but it's also just because there's pretty good coverage right now of what's going on in places like Iowa or maybe in the Southeast and so on. And so keep an eye on that. If we see some particular information that'd be good for you to have for context as to what's happening in other areas, we'll make sure we put together a quick memo and send it out to everybody. Last thing I wanted to say was that I know that superintendents and others, you're really struggling trying to figure out the funding, and there is some money available right now, and you know as well as anybody else does that that's probably not going to cover the expenses that you have, not just last year, but over the upcoming 6 to 8 months. It's very important that you are transparent with your community about the investments that you're making right now to try to improve safety. First of all, it definitely helps your credibility and your reputation in your community. But in addition, it lays the groundwork for the moment where you may have to go to community members and ask them to step up to push legislators to provide some more special funding for school districts, Or you may need your community to understand that, because at some point down the road, you might either need to pass an operating levy, or maybe you'll get permission to have a board-approved levy to cover some of these expenses. And in all of those cases, the better background your community has going into that discussion about how you've spent your resources, the better off you'll be in educating them and bringing them along for support. So Jeff, that's what I had. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Todd, and thank you, everyone. The reason I asked Neil to look at the University of Colorado study was the arts guidance that came out from the department was very vague if you have looked at it at all. And they talked about University of Colorado doing their work, but they didn't post any results. And I think if you look at the results that Neil has posted, you need to be real cautious with those guidance, because I didn't think they were at all, they were not taking into account the latest data on particle transmission, to be blunt. And I'm not sure why they didn't wait until the data was out or use the data. So that's my editorial remarks on the arts guidance. And Neil, I see you nodding your head.
Yes, yes, very much. Yep.
Okay. Another question that came from Ken Anderson on open enrollment. And it's interesting, that was addressed in the commissioner's call yesterday. And it makes a difference how long a student has been open enrolled. If a student has been open enrolled at least a year from your district to another district, and they wish to return to your district, you have to let them back. But if they've been open enrolled for less than a year, they're supposed to stay there for a year. And so at that point, it's an agreement between the superintendents to allow this to happen. What's also interesting is a homeschooler can return at any time. Now, if a student wants to open enroll out of your district, that's allowable. Now, obviously, it's violating the timelines, which are in statute, but hardly anybody addresses those. And the 1 year difference does not make a difference if the districts are in an achievement and integration zone. And Ken Foley is, so there'll be no timeline on whether someone wants to return to Foley because they've been open enrolled somewhere else. So that's a little twist on the open enrollment matter. Are there other questions on the chat or other questions that people have? Okay. Next week, for sure, we're going to be addressing academic and staff preparation, and we'll also talk about contact tracing. And so for the panelists, if you would reach out to your county health, if they're going to help with contact tracing and how you're going to do that, because Jeff shared a very interesting thing he learned yesterday. Jeff, you want to just share that, what you texted me, please?
Sure. I was on a national call yesterday with superintendents from across the country. And as you know, some school districts in other states have started school already. And the feedback from the school superintendents they were being overwhelmed by trying to follow up on COVID cases or potential COVID cases with staff and students. And so you heard Andy Almos talk about they're working on those scenarios with their health folks on what happens if scenarios. I think that would be great advice for folks to start thinking about that with your local health folks, because those superintendents, they were like, oh, we're spending 3/4 of our day on phone calls trying to answer questions and comments from concerned parents about, I heard Susie had COVID at a certain class, they were next to my kid, what does that mean for my child? And they were just being overwhelmed with that information. So that was the advice I got from the national call. So thanks, Ray.
Yep. So that will be next week's. And I also want to congratulate all three soups on the creative ways you're dealing with things. And Andy, I thought that your point that anyone who has a temperature is almost going to be quarantined for 14 days because you don't know what it is, was a very important point to consider as people do this. And Tony Cox just said, I believe contact tracing will be discussed at the MDH meeting next week. And Tony, if you could let us know is that an MDH meeting with the regional support teams or the MDH meeting with the school nurses? Because I know they're holding meetings with school nurses weekly. Okay, the district meetings with the regional support teams. Okay, so hopefully you'll get more information next week on contact tracing at your regional support team meeting. Thank you, Tony, for sharing that. And I'd like to emphasize what Todd just said about national news. You may have seen that Iowa, the governor is ordering schools to reopen with at least 50% attendance, and the Des Moines Public Schools and the Iowa Teacher Union are suing the governor over whether she has the power to make such an order. And so Todd is right that the national events outside of our state could very easily filter into your conversations with your parents, especially for districts that are on the border, like Andy, close to Wisconsin, and in Bemidji, fairly close to North Dakota. So that's really, really good advice. Aaron, I'm not seeing a lot of other questions, so maybe Jeff, you want to wrap this up a little ahead of time?
Sure. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with finishing early. I just want to, maybe a couple of points I've heard, and I've received a lot of calls this last week from school superintendents asking about ventilation related questions, and school boards wondering how can we be COVID certified for our school district on our ventilation systems. And again, I just encourage folks, if you've got questions like that, reach out to members from ICS or other companies to help you through that, because there's no real simple answers to that, to those types of questions, and it's becoming a hotter topic. Oh, Fred, I think we got somebody that might have raised their hand with a question. Let's see. Can you allow them to ask their question? Lyndon Olson, are we able to unmute you and let you ask the question?
I must have accidentally moused over something because I didn't have one. Thank you.
Okay.
Good to hear your voice, Lyndon.
Thank you.
Great. Another question that's been raised by a number of districts, and maybe something for us, again, let us know in the chat function if you think it's pertinent, but how we're addressing childcare, I think, is another big challenge that many districts are facing as well. So if that's something also, those that are attendees, if it's something you'd like us to cover, by all means, certainly let us know. But with that, I'll just thank everyone for attending today. We are going to be doing this again next week. We're also considering maybe moving our Friday before Labor Day time or day, just to try to be more respectful of people's time. We'll keep you posted on that. But otherwise, good luck this week as everyone continues their planning forward. So thank you all.